Welcome to the Together Discussing Natural Sources podcast. My name is Vincent, and I will be your host today. Today we welcome Gaël Lescornec, who is the director of the Sustainable Vanilla Initiative, SVI for short. For context, DeMonchi Natural Products is a founding member and committee member of the SVI. So this is why we have a particular interest in this organization and to discuss what the organization does, its mission, its achievements, the outlook for the future, and how it can, of course, impact the vanilla industry. So welcome, Gaël.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Thanks for having me.
Great. All right. So, let's start with the beginning, of course. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Your journey to becoming the director of the SVI and what motivates you to work in this industry.
Absolutely. So first of all, I'm French-American and have actually spent most of my working life in South Africa and live here in the Netherlands. And I say this because I think it's shaped a lot of my values today and why I decided to work particularly in trade and in sustainable trade. Growing up in the 80s in Miami, in America, it was the boom for growth and growth at any cost. Mm-hmm. But I think my real French roots around equity and also living in South Africa showed me that we all have to benefit from a growth that is equitable and attribute value and risks along all these different supply chains that actually make us, who we are, but also make us happy, such as vanilla or cocoa, which I spent 10 years in. Mm-hmm. There's just a huge opportunity there to really make these supply chains much more sustainable, where everyone has to win. So I think, using trade to really drive equity for me is what motivates me to do this work and to contribute to a little bit less of a fragile world.
Excellent. Well, thank you for this short introduction. Gaël, could you tell us a little bit about SVI? Explain to us what is SVI in a few words.
Yeah. Well, listen, Vincent, I think before talking to you about SVI, I need to go back a little bit because, I was just talking about how in the 80s it was, growth at any cost. Along the years, what we have seen, and it's not just, those interested in value distribution, is that growth comes with costs, but it also comes with risks.
Right.
And so de-risking some of our value chains and understanding a little bit more what's going on at production level, et cetera, it's become a must, right? So sustainability is no longer this kind of nice to have or little CSR projects, but it's become a way to future-proof our supply chains. And so what we've seen in all commodities, right? So cocoa, where I've been working for the past 10 years, before vanilla, coffee, cotton, palm oil, is more and more multi-stakeholder platforms coming together. So bringing all of the supply chain actors, so industry, exporters, importers, but also public stakeholders around common commitments. So what's the common direction that we should be going in to make our supply chains more healthy, right? So that's been a trend. And so SVI was born out of that trend, right, in 2015, which is 10 years this year. Very happy to celebrate that. Basically to look at how can industry come together to agree on what is needed to have a more stable vanilla market, because we know that vanilla is dominated by a lot of volatility, extreme volatility, but also how can we drive a more sustainable production of vanilla? And so since then, we've grown to represent more than 70% of the global market in vanilla in a pre-competitive, so that's in a non-commercial way, to address some of these sustainability challenges together. And that's our mission, and that's why we have also very proud to have DeMonchi as part of that mission.
Thank you. Okay, great. So in this context, of what SVI is and its mission and so on, what would you say what would you consider SVI's most significant achievements to date?
So, I guess to begin with, and the last point that I was making, I think the biggest achievement is having brought together more than 70% of the market, right? So the members that we have represent some of the biggest brands, obviously beyond vanilla, but biggest brands in the world. It includes some of the biggest flavor houses in the world. It includes, some of the biggest, not just vanilla, but also baking, confectionery brands. Also, some of the more local brands. Also in Madagascar, we have now 21 exporters that are members of SVI. So the asset of SVI is its members, and having had the ability to bring together the majority of the market, I think is a huge achievement, because when we are able to get commitments and consensus, it really has weight. It really has impact. So I would say that's one of the biggest achievements. The second achievement, I think, has been the engagement and the constructive, constant engagement that we have at production level, and which has been, especially with Madagascar, which is 80% of the production worldwide. And over the past 10 years, the work that we've been doing, I would say, one, in advocacy around having the right policies and programs in place for a conducive environment for a stable supply chain. So both in terms of ensuring that there's more of a sync between supply and demand, but also that there's much more professionalization, that we really have a professionalized vanilla sector. And that includes, working with regional and national authorities on looking at traceability systems, right? What's the infrastructure to make sure that, there's a little bit more traceability and transparency, that farmers are getting what they need, what they deserve. So I think the advocacy there and the work that we've done with government has been really important, and I think has had an important influence on how the market has evolved. And thirdly, I think what is probably the biggest achievement, which is the most recent, and which is also, I think, where I want to really focus in terms of our priorities, is on the first ever public goal on sustainable vanilla, which we're currently working on, which is our 2030 Charter on Sustainable Vanilla. And that's a really important step, right, in terms of even the global transparency that we're trying to drive within vanilla, but also to stimulate much more demand and much more confidence in the market.
Yes, that's a very important point, and actually, it's a good transition to my next point. So today, what are SVI's top priorities? And I guess within the context of this charter.
So. Exactly. Within the context of this charter, and this is why this charter was important, because there was clear consensus amongst all our member companies of SVI that, firstly, there's a need to have much more impact and demonstrated impact on the ground. And what do we mean by that? We mean improved livelihoods of farmers, number one. We know that, especially in Madagascar, this is one of the poorest countries in the world. We know there's an estimated about 80 to 100,000 vanilla farmers. There's a huge opportunity for vanilla to actually contribute to the well-being of those farmers.
Right.
But also in terms of biodiversity. The Sava region of Madagascar, which is where vanilla production is concentrated, is home to the last green belt of Madagascar, one of the most biodiverse areas in the world. And vanilla is actually a forest-positive crop. It's an orchid that grows around a tree that can be planted. It doesn't need deforestation. It doesn't need forests or trees to be cut. It's actually the opposite. So there's a huge value. And I think we haven't demonstrated enough the positive value that vanilla can have. So we need to really demonstrate that on the ground. We need to be operational. But at the same time, that's also allows us to demonstrate how we can minimize risks linked to vanilla production. And that helps also in laying the ground for some of the directives that are also coming up, particularly the European due diligence directives. So just to summarize that, I think stimulating more impact on the ground and de-risking our value chain and future-proofing our value chain, that's number one. Number two is stimulating demand. We need to have much more demand for sustainable vanilla. And for that, we really need to engage more of the end consumer and buyers.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? So the brands, even distributors and retailers, right? That we really need to get them on board to be on this vanilla journey with us, or sustainable vanilla journey.
Absolutely, and this is why we have this kind of podcast actually to discuss these topics that are quite important, and to really show that to the market that the demand for sustainable products can be met. We have the tools in place, we have the frameworks in place, and there's no reason not to move in that direction.
Exactly, and speaking of tools and frameworks, I think going back to this charter. This is where we have an opportunity to bring everyone together to agree what are the parameters for that journey, right? What should we be agreeing on? What are the minimum practices that really make a difference for vanilla? Because not everyone is an expert, and especially the brands and those that are more far removed from the production, what they need to know is simply, okay, we just want to do what is necessary. So tell us, because you're the experts. And I think this is where the charter is really important. We have looked at a public goal for the first time to have 50% of the supply chain sustainably sourced by 2030. This is quite a big hike from where we're at now, but we think it's absolutely possible. But we've also been able to rally together to identify what are those minimum practices. So beyond verification, beyond your certification, which is very important, we also know that there are 4 minimum practices that need to be rallied around. So one is around traceability, especially to the farm and cooperative level. 2 is having at least specific activities and roadmaps to closing the living income gap of farmers and improving their livelihoods. 3 is around having a forest positive activities. And 4 is around minimizing human rights risks, right? And within that, we have very specific measurements. So being able to not only provide clear direction and clarity, but also the tools necessary to enable members like yourselves to map out, okay, so what are our risks? And then how do we address them, not just alone, but also collectively?
Yeah, and in addition, we see that SVI creates this forum for different actors of different sizes and different resources, right? So for companies such as the Monchi Natural Products, we have experience doing this. We're pioneering some of these sustainability aspects that you're mentioning, and because we have the resources to do it, we have the people that are trained to do it, and we know what to do. But then we have smaller actors, smaller operators, for example, within Madagascar that perhaps need support. Or maybe even smaller buyers, in Europe or in the US, who don't really know in which direction to go, what all of this means concretely on the ground. And so SVI in that regard can bring everyone together, and of course the public functions, right, the government and so on, to help each other out, on how to achieve these sustainability goals.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you hit the nail just on the spot, because I think in all my work around this pre-competitive work on sustainability in any sector, what is key in bringing companies together, very different profiles of companies, very different sizes, is that collaborative aspect. To understand that the value and the risk does not stay in just one side of the supply chain, that it needs to be spread across the supply chain. So it's understanding that if we don't collaborate, even if it's client customer, but also big company and smaller company, of looking at, hey, this is what we've tested out, this is what we've learned, this is how you can scale this. in an efficient way, because we all have to benefit from better practices being adopted by the whole supply chain, because we know that if we work alone, that's great, but the whole sector will lose if its reputation and the sector is associated with negative practices. So it's that collaborative work is absolutely critical, and I think it's one of the principles that every member recognizes when they join SVI. Right, they become part of a community that is there for the same intention.
Indeed. So, okay, all of this is all well and good, but obviously it's not an easy road to improve sustainability in this industry. So, what are the challenges that SVI is facing today, in Madagascar and elsewhere?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really important question, and I think it's a relevant question for all sectors in our supply chains today, right? Even beyond Madagascar, beyond vanilla, there are a lot of critical issues that are beyond our control. So when we talk about sustainability, we can't talk about sustainability without talking about trade and buying and purchasing. And that aspect, and because we're a non-commercial voluntary industry platform, we don't have control over how members buy and how the demand is being stimulated, right? And so that is the biggest challenge, and that's why all we can do is promote sustainable procurement practices that look at distributing value, but also risks, that promote long-term loyal relationships with exporters and with cooperatives and with farmers. But I think the whole business practice side of things is something we don't control, but which is completely tied to how sustainable production is. So that's one. On the other hand, there's also at producing level, there's also the whole aspect of sector governance, how the governance of the vanilla sector, including especially in Madagascar, is being governed. And that is beyond our control. As much as we can advocate, as much as we can, bring our expertise and share, with local and national government, how we observe the right conditions for a sustainable sector. Madagascar has enormous challenges. It has enormous opportunities, but it's dealing with very complex issues. It has to take certain choices, which sometimes are, creates an enabling environment and sometimes does not. So I think keeping that constructive dialogue, especially with authorities in Madagascar, is absolutely key to always share basically the different information and also studies and experiences that our members are having is really critical. And also, I think having integrated 21 exporters, Malagasy exporters, into SVI has also helped a lot to bring that voice to our work with the Malagasy government.
Yes, coming together as a one unified voice.
Yeah.
To enable dialogue with the government.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So we have discussed at length already about the industry collaboration and which is an important aspect, and once again here even with the government. But what we'd like to ask you now is what kind of innovation or innovative approaches or technologies does SVI use to achieve its mission?
Thanks. This is a really important one. I think we have been looking at a lot of different technologies and innovations. One, especially in terms of traceability, right? That's one of the biggest challenges in vanilla, and linked also to biodiversity. I was just mentioning how Madagascar especially is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. So we've been actually building on a technology that has been used within IDH, and IDH being the Sustainable Trade Initiative that is hosting SVI and a number of other sector initiatives. And within that they have developed, together with a company called MapWorks, landscapes monitoring tools. And what that is basically tools that are capturing real live satellite images of whether it's protected areas, forest areas, bushfires, wetlands, any kind of metrics you can think of. And so you map those out in detail in the different regions that you want. So we have these for different sectors around the world and different regions. And so we've been able to adapt this landscapes monitoring tool for Madagascar and for the vanilla producing regions of Madagascar. What we've been able to do is also access GPS locations of at least verified or certified vanilla production of our SVI members, and to overlap that, right, around looking at protected areas, looking at, for example, tree loss, or in order to really understand at a very detailed, granular level, what are the risks, but also what are the opportunities. And what we see is fascinating. And we're starting to use these maps, one, to demonstrate the positive influence that vanilla production can have on biodiversity, but also to identify what are the high-risk zones on deforestation, which is actually driven by rice culture, charcoal, and a lot of the food security issues in Madagascar. And so once we identify those high-risk zones, we can direct investments from company programs into those zones, but also broker public-private collaboration, especially with local authorities and with the Ministry of Environment in Madagascar, in order to have much more impactful contributions from the private sector. So this whole kind of landscapes mapping tools has really been key for, I think, 2 of our 4 priorities, which is better traceability and also better investments on biodiversity.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So within all these programs, what would you say? What kind of improvement has SVI brought to the farmers level today?
Very good question, and I think I wish we had more data, and I wish we had more ways to measure that, to measure impacts at the farmer level itself. Unfortunately, in a context where we have very little visibility, let alone even knowing how many farmers are there, how many plantations, we just unfortunately don't know. We don't have that information. And this is one of the areas that that we're working with authorities and with stakeholders on. So without that information, we base our observations through anecdotal data. And I'll give you one example. For example, we've been working together with a third-party researcher, also endorsed with Fair Trade International, these living income studies every 2 years, to get an idea of, one, what do farmers actually need to have a basic living income, and also what influence and what contribution do company programs actually have towards that. And one of the things that has come out, particularly last year in the study that came out last year, is that the company programs and the minimum practices that we are advocating for, and which are increasing, are having significant influence and contribution to farmer incomes compared to those that are not included in company programs. So at least we can compare that, right?
Yes.
We can see those SVI members that have company programs, that work with farmers directly. There's a clear difference even just in basic income. So continuing to promote that, continuing to stimulate these minimum practices, especially through the Charter, is what we're seeing on the ground is being evidenced.
Yeah, and if I can bounce off on this to maybe perhaps explain a little bit of anecdotal evidence that concerns the Monchi natural products. In Madagascar, we have created a farmers association which today has over 2,000 farmers. And this is through this association that we can do all our traceability and sustainability programs. And so we are very close to the farmers. Our local team spend a lot of time in the bush, the so-called bush, with the farmers, learning, how they live, what are the challenges, on a day-to-day basis, and we try to do our best, to support them, in between crops, for instance, to prevent, the selling and collecting and selling of green vanilla too early, for instance. We build schools which become community centers for the farming communities. We try to combat, child labor, and all these sort of things. So for us, we although we don't have, data, like you said, we can see directly what the impact is, and how positive it is.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and those are excellent examples. It's just that I guess SVI is a platform where we need to use those examples, like you just mentioned, and see how do we scale this?
Exactly.
How do we scale it in a way that really demonstrates collective impact, but also really provides confidence also to the end buyers that, oh, okay, the vanilla industry is really serious about this because we're seeing real progress in number terms. And I think this is, again, what we're trying to not just stimulate, but demonstrate with our charter in the next 5 years.
Right. And I could say, even for our company, that being part of SVI, we do get inspiration from other companies. We're looking at what programs they're doing, how we're doing them. Sometimes it's different than what we do. And we think, okay, well, this is a good idea. Perhaps it's something that we could replicate, and then we exchange with them and see, okay, how did you do this and that? And, how can we apply it to our own farming community? And all of this is thanks to SVI, which is something that perhaps if SVI wasn't there, we would not necessarily know, right? So
exactly. I think you bring a good point, because we talk about sustainability as if it's also a given, but the fact is, businesses are not experts in some of these, rural development challenges. These are, I've worked in rural development before, working in pre-competitive platforms, and it's complex. It requires expertise. It requires, just a whole lot of other types of resources. But I think that is exactly the value of any pre-competitive platforms: is you bring companies together to exchange on very specific topics, but similar challenges. And what's nice is, like we were talking about before, you have very different profile of industries, and some have the luxury or even the customers that invests in really supporting innovation. And so the result of that is, that you're able to share the message and to share what's working and what's not. And that's what we're trying to cultivate, especially on those 4 specific areas.
Great, thank you. So far, we've spoken, at length about what SVI does in Madagascar and what are its unique challenges and opportunities, of course. But now we'd like to understand if SVI has plans to expand its reach to other vanilla producing regions, such as Uganda or Indonesia or Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, no, very good question. I mean, just to emphasize, our work is really to drive a global, stable and sustainable market. But of course, with Madagascar having most of the production, a lot of our work is there, and there are a lot of opportunities. But definitely, I think even if we just talk about a stable market, it's important to see that diversifying origins is only good for a stable market, even for Madagascar, right?
Absolutely.
So it's in the interest, I think, of the whole supply chain to have stronger alternative origins. Specifically, SVI has been working very closely in the recent years with Uganda. We have been working with exporters there, and particularly the Exporter Association, which is called VANEX. on a number of issues, but I'd say primarily also to look at the advantages and really bringing up the value of Ugandan vanilla, right, in terms of its quality, in terms of also the fact that it's a two crop as opposed to a single crop season commodity in Uganda. So we've been engaged quite a lot in a branding campaign and really looking at through branding and marketing, what the qualities of Ugandan vanilla has to offer for the international market. So this is a big piece that we've been doing. But also, I would say, when it comes to also our 2030 charter on a sustainable vanilla, is looking at the opportunities that Uganda can have in terms of addressing some of those commitments in this charter. And so we're actually having next month a specific workshop with some of the exporters and some of the importers specifically on that to look at what does this mean for Uganda. But I think it's worth noting also that Uganda had some of its record export numbers last year, which, we don't know exactly, talk about measurement, we don't know exactly what has influenced that, but we'd like to think that, some of the work in really propelling the advantages of Ugandan vanilla has had some influence on that. Unfortunately, right, the downside to that is that the price is still very low.
Indeed.
Right? And so we need to all work that at a global level to make sure that the value of vanilla is, also proportionate to the value that is provided at farmer level. But I think beyond Uganda, of course, we want to be able to see sustainable production and growth of vanilla production benefit, all the different origins. Indonesia being one of them. And so I think through our global efforts, we really hope that there will be repercussions in the other origins. But for the time being right now, I think our focus is being really Madagascar and Uganda.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our podcast today, our episode. But before we conclude, I'd like to ask you, okay, where do you see the vanilla industry in 10 years and what are SVI's plan to contribute to that vision?
Yes, well, the vision is really to having a little bit more of a stable market. I think everyone would benefit from that. Really, just even if it's slightly more than it is now, we have these constant cycles in the vanilla market every 5 years, which are extreme. And I think mitigating that extreme volatility just a little bit more would really benefit whether it's end buyers, international importers, exporters, but especially farmers. So all the efforts that I talked about with you this morning is really towards that, right? It's towards really mitigating that volatility just a little bit. And second of all is what we talked about in terms of impact on farmers.
Right.
To be able to really demonstrate that. And for really farmers to say, this is something that I'm proud of, vanilla production, that I want to, really proudly also give to my next generation, my children. And that, that it's actually a worthwhile profession in the different countries of origin, right, beyond Madagascar. So I think that at the production side, having a thriving production supply chain is really what we're after. And I think with that comes, I guess a bit of a call to action to a lot of different players because we can't do it alone. And when I say we, it's this platform of industry players, right? We need the demand side. We need brands to come along on this journey and to demand, these same practices, these same principles, but also at government level, at producing and at consuming level, right? We know that at consuming government level, for example, the European Union, we have directives that are going more towards due diligence and towards deforestation mitigation, etc. These are the kind of, we need clarity on those directives that really incentivize the supply chain actors to be able to work in a concerted effort for de-risking our supply chains, but also at a producing country level government to have the right conditions available in country and to implement them in a transparent way. So I think that call to action is really for all the different players that have a role to play in making the vanilla chain a more sustainable one.
Indeed. And so where can our audience find out more about the SVI?
So I would recommend two sources. So the one source that I think is more probably active is on our LinkedIn page, so the Sustainable Vanilla Initiative on LinkedIn in our social media, and also our website, which I think gives much more details on all the work that we do and also all the work that the members do, which is sustainablevanilla.org.
Okay, great, excellent. So this wraps up our conversation with Gaël Lescornec, who is the director of the Sustainable Vanilla Initiative. Thank you very much, Gaël, for exchanging with us today.
Such a pleasure.
Great. Thank you very much, and see you next time.